Hi guys! I'm back with another Genshin Impact video, and today we're going over an updated build guide for Eula because her rerun is coming soon and because she's one of my favorite characters to play. I wasn't able to make a guide before for Eula when she first came out, but luckily I'm able to now. In this guide, I'll be listing down the best weapons, artifacts, team comps, and more to build Eula as a physical main DPS. So Eula is a very strong physical DPS, and I find her super fun to play. One tip I have for Eula is learning how to optimally use her burst skill combo. For Eula, you'd want to tap her E first to gain 1 stack of Grim Heart, and then use her burst, then hold your elemental skill, and then normal attack to charge up her Lightfall Sword. This combo is good to follow because Eula's burst automatically grants 1 stack of Grim Heart, and when you have a max of 2 stacks of Grim Heart consumed, surrounding enemies will have their physical resistance and cryo resistance decreased, making your Lightfall Sword hit harder. It takes a little bit to get used to, but this combo helps to increase your damage. Another tip I have for Eula is learning that the Lightfall Sword from her burst automatically explodes when she's off-field. So, for instance, if you're low on HP, you can switch to another character and Eula's Lightfall Sword will still trigger, albeit for less damage. Enough tips, now onto weapons. For free-to-play or budget players, one of the best options for Eula is the Snow Tomb Star Silver. This is the claymore you get from exploring Dragon Spine. You get physical damage bonus from the secondary stat, and the passive isn't too bad on Eula. Overall, this is a great free-to-play weapon, as you have an easier time getting refinements, and the weapon itself is one I would choose over the other free-to-play craftable weapons. Alternatively, you could run the Blackcliff Slasher. This is the claymore that is obtained from exchanging Star Glitter at the Paimon shop. You get crit damage as a secondary stat, which is always very helpful for builds, and the passive is okay against many enemies, but not so much against bosses. Another budget-friendly option for Eula is the Serpent Spine. This is the claymore from the Battle Pass, and you get crit rate from the secondary stat, which is always very helpful, and the passive is good on Eula, as she is a hyper carry and usually is out on the field for long periods of time. Overall, this is a great weapon option for Eula, especially if you have the weapon at high refinements. Moving on to 5 stars, Eula's best in slot is the Song of Broken Pines. This weapon gives physical damage bonus as a secondary stat, and the passive gives attack and normal attack speed buffs. Although this weapon has lower physical damage than the Snow Tomb Star Silver, it makes up for it by having one of the highest base attacks in the game, and attack buffs from the passive. Overall, this weapon makes Eula strong, but I don't think it's 100% necessary for her, as the other weapon options I've listed are still very viable. Another 5-star option is the Skyward Pride. This claymore is viable for Eula as you get energy recharge from the secondary stat, which isn't as bad as most people think. Eula often has a hard time getting her burst back if you don't run her with a battery like Diona or Raiden Shogun, and Skyward Pride helps Eula charge her burst much faster. Also, the passive increases all damage, which includes physical damage, by 8% at R1. Another 5-star option you can run is the Wolf's Gravestone, as the weapon gives attack percent as the secondary stat, and the passive gives an extra attack buff to all party members. Overall, Wolf's Gravestone is a great alternative weapon if you don't have Song of Broken Pines. Enough about weapons, moving on to the toughest part of character builds, and that's artifacts. Eula is a fairly straightforward main DPS to build, and one of her best builds is running her with a 4-piece Pale Flame set. You get 25% physical damage from the 2-piece set, and with the 4-piece effect, your attack is increased by 9% when your elemental skill hits an opponent. And once 2 stacks are reached, the 2-set effect is increased by 100%. Overall, this set is incredibly strong on Eula, especially if you have her at C2, and is arguably her best in slot set. Alternative builds you could run for Eula is 2-piece Pale Flame and 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry. From both the 2-piece sets, you get 25% physical damage bonus for a permanent total of 50% physical damage. It does stack, and this is a great build to use for Eula if you don't have a good 4-piece Pale Flame set, and is much easier to farm for. One last build you could run for Eula is either 2-piece Pale Flame or Bloodstained Chivalry, and 2-piece Gladiator's Finale or Shimenawa's Reminiscence. You get 25% physical damage from either Pale Flame or Bloodstain, and 18% attack from either Glad or Shimenawa. Although this build isn't ideal for Eula compared to the two other builds I've mentioned previously, it's still a viable build for her if you don't have a good 4-piece Pale Flame set and are struggling to get good pieces in general for Eula. Moving on to recommended main stats, Eula is once again very straightforward, and you'd want attack percent on the Sands, physical damage bonus on the Goblet, and crit rate or crit damage on her Circlet, depending on what you need more. For recommended substats, Eula generally needs crit rate or crit damage, energy recharge, attack percent, and or flat attack. Crit rate and crit damage are important as Eula is a main DPS. Energy recharge is useful for her because she does struggle to get her burst up without a battery, and attack percent or flat attack is good as she scales off of attack. Substats to avoid for Eula are Elemental Mastery, Defense percent, Flat Defense, HP percent, and Flat HP. Elemental Mastery doesn't really help Eula as the bulk of her damage comes from physical attacks, which aren't boosted from EM unless you count Shatter, and both Defense and HP generally don't help to boost Eula's damage at all. For talent level priorities, generally you'd want to level all of Eula's talents equally, but for the sake of this video, I'd recommend leveling her burst first, then her auto attack, and then her elemental skill. For constellations, generally I think Eula has really strong cons compared to other characters, but I don't think they're 100% necessary for her as I still find her strong even at C0. But anyways, my thoughts on her constellations. I think C1 is a great damage boost, as every time a stack of Grimheart is consumed, Eula's physical damage is increased by 30% for 6 seconds, and it can stack up to 3 times. If you're thinking about getting C1, I'd say it's okay to get, especially if you enjoy playing Eula and can afford it. I personally have my Eula at C1, but if not, C0 Eula is still perfectly viable and strong. C2 is another good constellation for Eula, as the cooldown of your hold version of your elemental skill is the same as the tap version. It's a great quality of life change and helps to utilize the passive from 4-piece Pale Flame set easier. Overall, this is a great stopping point for most players, and worth it if you really love Eula and want her to be strong. C3 increases her burst by 3 levels and is a pretty good damage boost, but I think it's only an okay constellation to stop for if you're a dolphin, but if you can't afford it, C2 is a better stopping place and more than enough for Eula. C4 makes your Lightfall Sword deal 25% increased damage against opponents less than 50 HP. This con is once again another DPS boost, but overall I don't think C4 is worth it compared to her earlier constellations. It's too expensive, and C2 or C3 are better stopping points for Eula. C5 increases her elemental skill by 3 levels. Generally, I don't think this constellation is worth it at all, and you'd really only get this if you're a whale and aiming for C6 Eula. C6 turns Eula's burst into a literal nuke. It's incredibly strong as you start with 5 stacks for her Lightfall Sword, and you have a better chance to gain stacks when hitting opponents with her normal attack, skill, or burst. I'd say it's worth it only if you're a whale and you love Eula, as C6 is just way too expensive for the majority of players. And now moving on to team comps. I only have a few team comp examples for Eula, both free-to-play and not so free-to-play friendly. Feel free though to ask in the comments if you still need help with team comp ideas. These team comps will also list some alternative characters if you don't have the characters I focused on built. For free-to-play comps, one comp I have for Eula is Eula as main DPS, Fischl as sub DPS, Rosaria as support, and Bennett as healer. Fischl helps to apply Electro for Superconduct and deal off-field damage with Oz. Rosaria helps to trigger Superconduct with her burst and act as a sort of battery for Eula with her elemental skill, and Bennett helps to heal, as well as provide a good attack boost with his burst. Overall, this team comp is centered around helping buff Eula's damage as much as possible and is fairly strong. Alternative characters you could use are Beidou, Lisa, or Raiden Shogun instead of Fischl, Diona or Kaya instead of Rosaria, and Barbara instead of Bennett if you're in need of a healer, and you can run Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers on her for an attack buff. Another free-to-play team comp you could run is Eula as main DPS, Beidou as sub DPS, Fischl as support, and Diona as healer. This team comp utilizes double resonances, specifically Cryo and Electro. You once again get Fischl to apply Superconduct and provide off-field damage with Oz. Beidou helps to act as a backup to create Superconduct for Eula and provides damage and shields if you have her at high constellations with her burst. And Diona helps to heal, as well as provide additional shields and act as a battery to help Eula get her burst back faster. Overall, this is a great team comp to use that synergizes very well together. Alternative characters you could run are Lisa, Raiden Shogun, or Sara instead of Fischl or Beidou, and Chi-Chi instead of Diona, but it's not as optimal though because Diona provides much more utility. Moving on to not so free-to-play friendly team comps. One team comp that's viable and the one I personally use is Eula as main DPS, Raiden Shogun as sub DPS, Zhongli as support, and Bennett as healer. Raiden helps to provide superconduct reactions with her elemental skill and helps to charge Eula's burst with her own burst. Zhongli provides much needed shields and a bit of an attack boost for Eula if you run him with 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith, and Bennett helps to provide heals as well as a good attack boost with his burst. Overall, I find this team comp very strong, and it helps to maximize Eula's burst damage as much as possible. Alternative characters you could run for this comp are Lisa, Fischl, or Sara instead of Raiden, Xinyan instead of Zhongli, and Diona instead of Bennett. And now I'll be showcasing my Eula build for those who might be curious. My Eula is level 90 with decent but definitely improvable stats. I use level 90 R1 Song of Broken Pines with her. For my artifacts, I personally run her with 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry and 2-piece Pale Flame, as I still have yet to have a great 4-piece Pale Flame set for her. For talent levels, she's at 9, 6, and 10. And she's also C1. Now here are some clips showcasing my Eula for reference on how much damage I do. And that's it for this video. If this guide was helpful for you, leave a like, comment, or even consider subscribing to the channel. I plan to make a few more guides in the future, and I'd really appreciate any support. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!